Hello there and welcome to another live chapter reading for Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Today I shall be reading from Caged Fire, The Vigilant Book 2 by L.M. Preston. Chapter 1. It was cold and the room was dank with a hint of musk. EmVee observed her father's moves as he warmed up in the dingy corner of the MMA fighting cage in front of the pool table where she leaned. His dark eyes did a quick scan of the room until they found her. Watching his fists move in rhythm called to her desire to join him in the ring, but she fisted her hands instead. The abandoned warehouse was nicer than the other places they'd gone for him to compete. It had a tall ceiling with scattered holes in it, which allowed the cigarettes and vapour smoke to spread upward and away from her sensitive nose. She smelled everything much more acutely than most, and the colliding scents made her feel ill. Tonight she combated the sensory overload by chewing on some gum. It would help the nausea created by the multitude of unwashed bodies. She stuck the gum out slightly to tease the bottom lip so her nose could latch on to the scent. Appearances of people often belied their body's odour. EmVee observed the woman ahead of her. The barely dressed female was draped over a shorter man. EmVee could tell by taking a sniff that the woman hadn't washed since her last encounter with some John. The shorter man had his hand on her back, introducing her to an older guy, who flashed money for a bet like he was her pimp. EmVee didn't allow her curiosity to linger on the odd couple. Instead, she directed her attention back to her father, who would win tonight. He always did, unless he got paid not to. Popping her gum, she put her hand out as someone waved money in front of her. Not bothering to look them in the eye, she pursed her lips. Put your name on the ticket and fold it in the money. That was her job, to place the bets. She'd worked the room. It was an easy money night tonight, since most of the audience consisted of betting foreigners visiting the States. EmVee flipped up her skateboard with the top of her foot and caught it in one hand. Trying to keep a light air of indifference, she pursed her lip and took the money. It was part of the game and it worked to get the overzealous gamblers to give up more funds. She smiled at the short, stocky man in front of her. "I want on the list for the next girl fight." EmVee flashed the cash at the guy. "No can do, kid, the list is booked. And Max Gold told me to make sure you weren't on the fight roster or he'd kick my ass." EmVee rolled her eyes. Her father always blocked her from competing. She'd win and he knew it. It didn't stop her from trying though. Years of training felt like they were going down the drain lately. Her father was supposed to be retired, but he was fighting for them now. Sighing, she stuffed her skateboard between the stretchable cords of her black backpack, then pushed past the guy. Ahead, a mass of brown waves and glimmering hazel gold-rimmed eyes caught hers. The bell rang, and in a flash the person disappeared in a crush of men pushing their way towards the cage. A bubble of fear trickled down the back of her throat. The guy, she knew him. He had some hair on his face that he hadn't before, but the resemblance was there. The stench was there. Her heart raced, and it hadn't done that in a long time, except during the nightmares. She pushed through the thickness of bodies and waving hands of cash, not stopping even though the public bet started to take place. She'd lose a lot of money by not picking the cash from hands along the path of her pursuit, but she didn't care. EmVee had to make sure she'd made a mistake. Kayson Whalen. It couldn't be him, EmVee muttered, her face hitting the shoulder here and arm there. She jerked side to side, pushing through the crowd. She'd have to warn her father they had to leave before their past found them. Escaping had to mean something. It meant that at least they were alive. They survived when the rest of her family didn't. The crowd roared and the announcer built up the momentum. EmVee stumbled back against a broad-shouldered man whose blue eyes shot daggers at her. "Hey, can I get in on that private bet?" A short bald man tugged on her sleeve. Irritated, EmVee snatched it from him. "The bets are closed." She searched around one last time and hoped she'd mistaken the guy she'd seen for Kayson. Kayson was a trouble she didn't need. Instead of missing the fight, she slipped to the front of the action and stood outside the cage. The sooner her father finished this one, the safer they'd be. Her father didn't know Kayson, but she did, and he spelled trouble. Sweat teased the side of her brow. With a trembling hand, she wiped it away. She'd never get used to the errant sensations in her body since the attack. Taking a moment to swallow the gum, she popped in another to get her through the fight. Rubbing her arms and willing herself to take deep breaths calmed her. The attack flashed like an insistent memory from her worst nightmare. She started to shiver against the taunting of it. It made her harder, angrier, and still plagued her when she felt the desire to run. Now was one of those times. EmVee was afraid, and it was because of the assault. For one moment in her life she couldn't defend herself. Thinking she'd seen Kayson had made her feel out of control and scared all over again. Being a trained fighter, then getting your butt handed to you within a moment of dying, messed with her confidence more than she wanted to admit. That one stupid moment of trusting someone she thought loved her made her battle with this new and foreign emotion of fear and self-loathing, so intense she barely hid it at bay. Raising her fist, she tried to get her father's attention. He needed to end the fight, and end it now. She jumped at a slap on her back, then quickly recovered to feign being relaxed. "He's earning his money today, baby," Phenom, the contact her father used to get him in exclusive fights, chuckled and tapped her arm with his elbow. She didn't mind. He was her current best friend's dad, who had offered them a place to stay more than once. He'd been there since they got out of that place and scorched a trail of fear into her soul. She forced a smile. Yes, he is. He will to win this one. EmVee knew better than anyone. She smelt the success on her father. His odour, the sweat, the adrenaline within him pumped stronger than his opponent. EmVee stared past the fight and gulped at the realisation that the crud had hit the fan. Taking several deep breaths, she willed herself to calm down. Maybe she hadn't seen Kayson from her old school. Oh well, he was the least of her worries now. The guy staring at the fight outside the gate was real. He was the worst possibility of anything the figment of her imagination of Kayson could be. This man was dangerous. Whereas Kayson was a nosy wannabe detective who could cause them trouble just by his curiosity and sharing of their whereabouts, this man was a killer. There was no way she could get her father's attention. He wasn't paying attention to her signal. They had to go. The guy standing rigid, eyes never leaving her father's form, was tall, thinner than she remembered, and had bags under his eyes as though he was haunted by something that robbed him of sleep. EmVee stepped further into the cage and flipped on her hoodie to cover her auburn ponytail. The menace was still there, his lips pressed thin, eyes narrowed as he watched the fight. EmVee studied him with her fists tight. "The winner is Max Gold," the referee lifted EmVee's father's arm. EmVee stepped forward and her father pivoted around with a huge smile on his face that dropped when he saw her. "Thank you, thanks." His father quickly shook hands with his opponent, being held up by his manager, then rushed towards her. "Dad, somebody from the void is here." EmVee pressed his cell phone into his hand. "I can't leave my stuff in the locker. Go wait for me out back." "But," EmVee grasped his arm, "the guy from the club is here." "Doesn't matter. Wait for me." The crowd enveloped her father. EmVee blew a stream of air from her lips, dropped her shoulders and pushed her way through in the opposite direction of her father. I hope you enjoyed this chapter reading and that you'll go check out the book. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.